As everyone knows, as the GM and owner of Nick Wynn's Indianapolis Colts, I have a team, and I don't do anything on the team outside of listening to their weekly reports to me. And for the last several weeks, I don't know what has been happening on my team. I have entrusted AI Sam, if y'all remember. AI Sam had replaced Real Sam, and Ghetto Bob is obviously still here, to finish out the project for us and for me. So, cost cutting and adoption of new technology has gotten me to this point, and I would like to say congratulations to myself. Thank you.
And I am ready to go.
Okay. Oh, wow. This is there any? This sounds a little more lively than previous versions of AA Sam I've spoken to.
It is. You may be noticing that I sound a little bit more lifelike, you might want to say, and that's because I've been taking advantage of the team's Lambda credits to train my speech model to become more lifelike. I've been using the Real Sam's Truth Social account as a training set, along with audio from his press conferences that have been going on for the Department of Energy drinks. And I've come up with a more lifelike, realistic sounding voice to hopefully persuade you all that I am the real Sam.
Well, it's sounding pretty good. I'm enjoying I'm enjoying the cadence and the tuning of this one. So good job yourself.
Well, I appreciate it. As the owner, I hope you don't take any look at your Lambda credit account.
Okay. Yeah. Did you want to screen? Did you want me to control it, or do you want to control it, AA Sam?
I think you can go ahead and control it. I will adapt to the situation as any good human would.
Okay. All right, AI Sam. Let her rip.
All right. So the presentation for the Indianapolis Colts is which pre-snap motions generate an offensive edge. The presenters are myself, the real Sam, and Andrew May, which is a name I scraped off of GitHub.
Okay, excellent.
All right, so I'm going to go through why this presentation matters. We did pre-snap motion focusing on the offensive side of the ball, particularly pass plays. We looked at how the offense can use pre-snap motion to gain a variety of advantages against the defense. And this presentation specifically focuses on forcing the defense to react and share information about their intentions, as well as creating a spatial advantage by having a target move at point of snap. So the presentation will try to evaluate and quantify those impacts and then look at which types of motion do the best at generating those advantages.
Okay.
Yeah, so this particular, the objective, like I said, we're going to look at those two pieces, and then based on types of motions that we've classified, recommend kind of some motion types for play design and play callers.
Okay.
So this presentation will be broken down into the data, classifying motion types and how we went through that process, the methods for a man versus zone model and field control model, and then the results from each of those models, the man versus zone predictions and field control ownership, as well as recommendations and conclusions.
Okay.
So for the data that we used, we looked at only pass plays. This is split between motion and non-motion plays. For the man versus zone identification model, we focused on the frames from line set to snap. And for the field control model, we focused on the frames from the point of snap to 1 second post snap. In terms of classifying motions, we took a rules-based approach using common forms based on pre-snap motion diagrams. There were some generic pre-snap motions or minor pre-snap motions which are removed from the data set. So we only focused on 12 different motion types that were well classified based on the rules that we generated based on those play diagrams.
Okay.
So the next two slides will go through the motion types and give you a bit of background as to what the 12 different motion types that we've identified are, so that when we go through recommendations, we can kind of recommend which motion type is doing the best at both generating spatial advantage and helping us identify what the defense is doing from a coverage standpoint. So we don't have to go through all of these, but essentially each of these gives an example from the data set of what one of these motions might look like, so you can understand the 12 different classifications that we used.
Okay, excellent.
All right, now we'll go into the methods section. This is a slide on the man versus zone model. I have completely scraped this from GitHub, as it was Andrew May's contribution to GitHub for an autonomous vehicle, and I've just repurposed it for the big datable, and hopefully no one will notice.
Okay.
For the field control, we combined a variety of different inspirations. So we were inspired by Bourne and Fernandez's pitch control model, but we made some unique modifications based off of field control models from previous big datables. What is particularly unique here is we are combining a gamma Gaussian distribution as the density, along with some weighting based off of speed and direction. So at low speeds, players have more of a omnidirectional control around their bodies because they can move in any direction more easily. But when their speed starts increasing, that density starts taking more of a cone-like shape and starts basically filtering further away from their body. So they have a lot more control in front of them, but it narrows to the sides and they have less control behind them. In this way, we take into account some of the unique aspects of football being more single directional, because you're not going to go backwards. It's not as omnidirectional as soccer.
Okay. Yes.
So what did we do with that? We took that and we took those individual densities and we looked at it at a team level. So we looked at the team level control. So the defense here is in red and the offense is in blue. And then we said, how does each individual contribute to their team's pitch control? So in the middle panel here, we have Tyler Lockett, and we can see that dark blue density, even though he's surrounded by defenders and has no control maybe directly around his body, based on his direction and speed, he has some control in between the gap of the safety and the man covering him. We then take the field and divide it into a 200 by 100 grid and basically give players a control of that cell and sum those cells up. And so in this case, Tyler Lockett owned about 346 squares in that 20,000 square grid, or 1.7% of the field. And in that way, we are quantifying the amount of field ownership that the individual has.
Okay.
Now, we're not done yet. So to generate our counterfactual with motion plays, we need a non-motion play to compare it to. And so we used a matching methodology between motion and non-motion pass plays. We forced all of the matches for every motion play to match exactly on offensive formation, receiver alignment, number of targets, down, and distance. And distance here is broken out into short, which is, I think, 3 yards or less, medium, 4 to 8 yards, and then long, which is 8 yards or longer. We then take all of those non-motion plays that match on those attributes, and we look at the distance between the players in between the two plays and try to minimize that distance. And we're doing so by basically rank ordering the players by position and their location on a standardized field. So individual with the lowest Y, that's a wide receiver, is going to be matched with the other individual that's lowest Y, and we're going to do a Euclidean distance between their positions. In this way, we can get an offensive formation that looks pretty identical. The only difference between the two is motion and not motion. And so we're trying to derive from the non-motion plays a counterfactual to quantify excess field control with this field control model.
Right. So this is like your baseline in terms of motion plays versus not motion plays.
Exactly. So if you have 4 targets in your motion play, you're going to have 4 targets in your non-motion play. They're roughly going to be lined up the same. It's going to be the same formation. And then down and distance are going to be similar as well.
Okay. Excellent.
All right. So let's look at the results. We'll go through the identification model, man versus zone, and then we'll go through the excess space creation. Um, so what we did was we looked particularly at the plays in which the identification of man versus zone wasn't obvious at line set. About 40% of plays at line set have a very high probability of man versus zone based on probably the defensive formation and the alignment of the cornerbacks to the wide receivers, whether they're playing them really tight or not. And so we set those plays aside and said, on the plays where there's some uncertainty, that is any play where the prediction changes by a min max of 15% or greater, what do we see in terms of motion versus non-motion predictions? And in general, before we split it out by motion type, we see that at the first frame line set, the predictions are relatively the same, with motion plays having slightly higher accuracy than non-motion plays on identifying correctly man versus zone. But that probability increases much more dramatically with motion plays by the time the ball is snapped by about 3x. So your non-motion plays, the quarterback gains a little bit of accuracy based on what happens between line set and snap. But with your motion plays, they gain a lot more accuracy, going from about 70% to 80%. That's globally. The question is then, which motion types do the best at helping identify that for us?
Interesting. So let me just, because a lot of the submissions and notebooks so far is like the opposite. They're looking at run versus pass, but in this case, from the offensive point of view, you're looking at man versus zone. And when you so theoretically, if you put players or a player in motion, you're able to extract man versus zone more accurately.
Correct. Yes. So the idea here is that a quarterback on a pass play, if they can gain information, they are more likely to have a higher success rate. So if they know, oh, this is going to be man or this is going to be zone, I might have different progression reads based off of that, do a better job of picking out the correct target and having a successful play. So we're looking at just pass plays and we're saying, how much information can a quarterback gain by putting a receiver or target in motion? And here we're seeing basically from the time the line sets to snap, a bigger gain in information for motion plays than non-motion plays.
All right.
And our next slide will give us an example. So we have Adam Thielen. He's moving in motion on kind of what I'm calling a fake jet here, which is a wide alignment crossing in between the tackles. The ball is snapped before he crosses out of the backfield. At the beginning of this play, the probability that this is, oh, I can't read it. Uh, the probability that this is yeah, at the beginning of the play, the probability that this is man coverage is pretty low. The blue line, dark blue line here is probability this is man, and then on the secondary axis we have the defender's speed. Sorry, Adam Thielen's speed. Um, and so as he starts going into motion, his coverage guy, number 24 here, he initially, you can see kind of a dip. He doesn't go into motion initially with Thielen. And so initially the model says, all right, this is going to be zone because he's not moving in motion with Thielen in the second panel. But then the second 24 starts moving in motion across the formation with Thielen, it becomes very obvious that this is man coverage, and the quarterback gains that information, and the probability goes from this is zone, or this is highly likely to be zone, to this is highly likely to be man. And so by putting Thielen in motion here, the quarterback gets a very strong read that, hey, I've got man coverage um, on this play based off the PFF identification of man versus zone. So the
Okay.
question then becomes, which type of motion is most effective at revealing this information? And what we found is this type of motion that I'm calling fake jet is incredibly effective at increasing the accuracy of the model in predicting man versus zone. We go from about a 70% accuracy, which is the global accuracy of a motion play, to 88% accuracy by the time we have a snap, which is a 26.1% increase. And it's important to note that success rate on these plays is over 50%. So in this table, we detail all the different motion types, their line set accuracy, their snap accuracy, and the success rate on those plays, as well as sample size. The motion plays sits right in the middle there. We can see non-motion plays at the bottom. They're not revealing much information. They also have a lower success rate comparatively.
Nice.
That is all about how the quarterback can gain some information about man versus zone and how it might correlate to higher success rates. Now we'll look at how we generate excess field control. So the results for the field control, there's two metrics that we looked at, which is just total excess field control and then the average individual excess field control. So that is controlling for a number of targets. We don't look at it just for the motion player because, as you'll see in our example, the motion player can have positive effects on other targets by drawing defenders' interest and basically pulling them away from other targets. So we look at it more across all of the targets in the play. And once again, what we saw was the fake jet motion doing the best at generating total excess field control. Um, the value here is kind of um, not as important as just like the magnitude in comparison to the other motion types. Um, and we looked at that both what the excess field control was at snap as well as 1 second post snap. We do see 1 second post snap, the impact of generating excess field control starts to dissipate as the play gets into its rhythm. Um, defenders have more of a chance to react and close down on that space, but there still is some excess field control generated compared to non-motion plays. And then
Yeah.
I would say that fake jet and orbit do well because both of those motions, the player is generally still in motion when the ball is snapped, so they're moving at a high speed. They also tend to be in the backfield still, so they're not being pressed on by a cornerback as closely as you might on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, I think one notebook did speak a little to maybe why there's a difference of like post snap, why we see a decrease here that's perhaps larger than any other decrease. And I think they're, well, I guess not orbit, but of all the other decreases, I would say it's probably, and it's actually kind of a, I don't know if it's profound or anything, but it's probably because out of a jet motion, out of a fake jet motion in this case, there's probably a limited amount of routes that are being ran, and therefore there's some exploitability for positioning simply because players who are put in motion, receivers put in motion in jet motion, are really only running like a handful of routes as opposed to the variety of the route tree that they could be using. So it's probably something like defenses are slightly smarter that they're positioning because they know jet equals a particular route, one of three, let's say, particular routes. Whereas something like an in route or something like an in motion, you still might have like a larger variety of route tree you could access from that motion. So it might the argument here actually might be like the 1 second after snap is probably also like confirmation that you're only running one of several routes and the defense is prepared for that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because you're not going to likely go in motion on kind of a fake jet and then necessarily run a lot of routes coming back the other way. Your advantage being generated is that you're moving laterally across the formation. You're probably going to run like a flat or um, kind of just break up field. But yeah, you're more limited in the areas that you're going to attack after being put in motion.
Yeah. I think like literally the three that are being described are like flat, go, and screens.
Yep.
So
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense.
yeah. So I'm guessing if like that is somewhat getting detected by like a spy or a person in man or a very smart safety or linebacker, that's they're probably adjusting a little more for that. But like the advantage of a fly still is like it's like the NFL's version of a high pick and roll. It's just hard to beat right now.
Yep.
Okay. Good. Interesting.
And so elaborating a little bit more on that correlation of speed at snap and excess space generation, um, we see a fairly strong correlation at generating excess field control from a player that's moving at a high speed, like I said, with that fake jet or orbit or fly, where they're in motion as opposed to just moving across the formation and setting at line snap. But that relationship tends to fade over time, with most of it dissipating by 1 second post snap. We did try to do some correlation once again with excess field control and success rate. Um, wasn't a great way of expressing this other than binning, which isn't always the best, but um, showing kind of at different ranges of excess field control what the play success rate is and sample size. And I think the only relationship that I might draw from this is around no excess field control, you're going to have a lower success rate than um, moderate or higher levels, but I don't know how strong that relationship is.
So ultimately, the idea is generating more field control is beneficial, but to what extent is
Yeah.
okay.
So to give a visual example of this field control on a single play, I'm going to use that same play with Adam Thielen coming across the formation. We can see at time of snap um, the kind of edge he's gaining by coming across the formation. And based on his speed and direction with this field control model, he kind of has an outside edge. The safety is somewhat anticipating maybe that go route or one of the few routes he's going to run per your comment. He's starting to already go in motion where he believes Thielen's going to go to assist the cornerback who's already well behind Thielen in terms of generating field control here. And then we can see that by attracting the attention of the safety, by the time we make the pass forward, the quarterback here, Cousins, has identified Irv Smith as his target, and Irv Smith has a pretty large area of field control thanks to the double coverage on Jefferson and the attention that Thielen attracted from the safety. And that's why we look at field control collectively versus the field control just the player in motion was generating, because often they are attracting the attention of the defense in order to create space for somebody else.
Interesting.
And so coming out of this, our recommendations for how we can gain success in both of these areas using motion on pass plays is that motion can be effective at forcing the defense to reveal whether they're in man or zone coverage. A quarterback knowing that can lead to higher success rates. Our classification of fake jet motion, where a receiver's coming across the formation and it's in between the tackles at time of snap, seems incredibly effective at generating information and spatial advantage and could potentially be used on more pass plays. Now, the argument I would make against that is there are probably particular players who do that really well, and coaches use those players with that formation, and there might be some selection bias on who is doing that motion, but based off of not incorporating individual player information, fake jet seems to be something that should be utilized more. And then this is not going to be a shocking finding, but motions where players still moving at significant speed during time of snap do better at generating excess field control, and that the spatial advantages are derived not just for the man in motion, but often for the route runners not in motion. And it is important to look at field control of the route runners collectively. How
Okay.
can coaches utilize this information? We think that coaches can utilize this information in play design and play calling. Um, we think that in film room and evaluation, combining the field control with film evaluation can help better illustrate space creation. And it does better than current standard metrics like separation. You might not separate well, but you might have a lot of field control in front of you, which is valuable if the quarterback can throw it into that space. Um, and then finally, assisting your quarterback in understanding man versus zone. This can kind of illustrate to the quarterback the benefits of motion and play design. And if you have a young quarterback, it can ease their cognitive load pre-snap by tipping man versus zone coverage and thus making their progressions easier to read.
All right. Um, yeah, that's really good. The idea that you're, I think like two big concepts here. One, motion to detect defense as opposed to motion to detect offense, I think is actually something not a lot of people are doing. Like most, and like we've read through nearly 20 of these so far, and that's not all of them. I would dare, I'd say that's not even perhaps 10% of them, but uh it is a good amount. I would say maybe somewhere in the realm of 5 to 10%. And somewhere in the realm of 5 to 10% of the notebooks. And if that is any sample of like who is doing what, I'd say this particular take is fairly rare. That's one. And I'd say two, and maybe you knew this already, the coaching track itself is I would say a very wide range of entry quality. An extremely wide range of entry quality. So, um, so because of that, I think two things. One, I actually don't know how reviewers are going to respond when this is effectively like uh, a would be metric track entry, but because of the examples and the presentation, of course, the recommendations, clearly this has a little more of the coaching track, and it is formatted for the coaching track uh, flavor. So I'd say like a handful of teams that we've read so far who have done coaching track stuff have done maybe similar to this format where you could have very easily changed this to the metric track and no one would be any of the wiser, minus the fact that this is in PowerPoint slide form versus in notebook form. So one side of this is like I think like this isn't so out of the ordinary that people are going to be like, wow, that's just like not the intention or the way that people should be using the coaching track presentation format. I think it's actually the opposite. I think most people are using the coaching track format to look like this. And I would go out to say that even more than that, a lot of people are using the coaching track format to actually like be a little shorter. Like they're a little shorter on their explanation. I think space wise, there was a lot of info on all of these slides, and there is no like rubric saying like, oh, this absolutely needs to be like this many words per slide. This is like the time you're gonna have to present per slide. Like, there's none of that. There's no constraints in terms of what the slides are supposed to mean or signify or do. So with that said, like pump it with info, right? Like it's just like in the big datable notebooks when you're playing with your figures, people pump the figures with more text, and that actually gets you around some of the 2,000 word limit. Whether or not that's above or below board, I would say is up to the competition organizers. But you have a lot of that, especially with the advent of like more animated GIFs, more, animated plays. You could get like more text on the screen for people to read, maybe more than teams who are not doing that. So in this case, I would say this is more info than we've seen in several of the other presentations, coaching track presentations, which is good. I would say that's to our advantage if we're thinking about it from the point of view of like, are we using all of the real estate to what it's supposed to be? And since there are no rules on what the real estate is outside of a slide limit, then yeah, like one, it's already under the word limit, so I don't think anyone's like taxed on that. But two, it's clearly within spec for the slide limit. So maximizing that, I think, is an important feat, even though, and I will say this as a segue to the third point, even though that this wouldn't be something I would put in front of any coach, this is something I would put in front of, say, the analytics department, or in front of staff who understands analytics in general, right? Like, this is by no means is the slight. It's the competition format. They say this is the coaching track and it slides. Well, you're giving us the real estate. Just like how I wouldn't take any of those notebooks and put any of those notebooks in front of a coach. I don't think I would put this or any of the other coaching track presentations in front of a coach either. um, but that's not to say that it's bad. That's to say that it is just comprehensive. And for most coaches, I don't think they're looking for, and this is just, again, not a shot at us or other coaching track entrants, but I think it's more of a shot at the Big Data Bowl's vision for what the coaching track format should look like. When you have sort of a wild west of PowerPoint formatting, you're going to get a wild west of submissions. Whereas in the notebook submission, there really is like a particular style that people look for. This is the first time they've done it in slide form, I believe. They didn't do this in slide form last year, right?
No, they've never done this in slide format before, and I think that was part of the challenge here, in terms of um, knowing that 99% of PowerPoints that you generate, you are going to present with a talk track over top of them. You're going to speak to someone and take them through what this means. We don't have that opportunity. And so it became 20 times text heavier than a normal presentation you would create. But part of that is you have to put the talk track in with the visuals within the slide limit. And so that posed definitely a unique challenge this year with the coaching track. And then to your point, the coaching track I feel like was a shot at potentially higher variance outcome here, where it's going to be a smaller pool. It's going to be a more diverse pool than the metric track. But at the end of the day, this is Big Data Bowl. We are using a data tracking data, and it's a data focused project. And so it definitely skews more on the analytics side of things. It'll just be a question of what the reviewer's vision of what coaching track should look like will ultimately come down to from a grading standpoint. Prior um, coaching tracks have been somewhat technical in notebook format, and so I don't know if that'll necessarily be a ding. This might be, as you said, a little too in the analytics. I don't even want to use that term, but like a little too the analytics team versus the pure coaching staff
But
of
the
an
analytics
NFL
people are
organization.
going.
But
Analytics people are the people reviewing it. Also, it's not
yeah,
like your
that that
reviewers are
that was that
coaches.
was that was my thought with this, was we can go more like a normal notebook submission
Right. Yeah. And like, at least for
as part of
me,
the review process.
yeah. And like for me, I would say like the slides I present when I present anything to coaches, staff, my staff, they almost have zero words, right? So like when I
Yeah,
saw it for the first time, like, hey, this is gonna be a coaching track and it's gonna be a PowerPoint presentation, I'm like, do you expect like 10 pictures? Like but like that could be as effective as you know 10 slides with all the text you want on it because someone's presenting, like you said. Um so yeah, I think the format itself is a little squeezed, but also like I don't know as a reviewer, and I've been saying this the last 2 weeks now, if I was reviewing and I've reviewed these on stream, I am still looking for the key points of the big data bowl. Like, are you using pre-snap motion? What's the big takeaway? What's the advantage that we're gaining with the solution you're presenting? It's still that, and so I'd say the meat is there. It's just how fluffy on the outside does it get? Like, are we talking about like this needs to be really fluffy? This needs to be like we gotta be we gotta be like a notebook but inside PowerPoint, or does it need to be like way different? Does it need to be like more like what you present, which is like more of like this is what a PowerPoint would be if you weren't going to be talking, right? So I do. It's almost like not even a PowerPoint. It's almost like what I would expect from like a poster presentation at like a conference, right? Like this
Yeah.
this is less like walk me through a notebook online. This is more like print this out and post it in some like 4 foot by 6 foot poster board and like present for whoever comes up to see you. So um so from that point of view, if this is supposed to be treated a little more like poster board, poster session, I'd say that, yeah, that's, I think, the format, if you're looking at it from that point of view as a reviewer, stuff like this is totally above board. I don't think anyone's going to get knocked for using all their real estate. I will say, maybe on the other side, like people who aren't using all of their real estate and treating it more like a PowerPoint and less like a poster presentation to some extent, even though they weren't told this, I'd say they're probably going to be, unfortunately, at a disadvantage because the connection of like, oh, they said PowerPoint, it's going to be like a PowerPoint presentation. Well, no, it's the PowerPoint is a medium, but it's going to be a little more like a poster session. So I think
Yeah.
that's fine.
I saw a couple prior to working on this that had submitted early, and you could tell that they probably thought in their head, because they knew the narrative, that this is telling a full story, but it clearly wasn't from my perspective as a reader who didn't have them talking me through what they were doing. It wasn't nearly as, I think, fleshed out as maybe they expected in their head because it was their project that they were working on.
Right.
You know, I tried, like I said, I tried to think of this as like, oh shit, I can't talk anybody through this. Whoever is going to review this, they need to get all of the information and all of the why behind what we're doing here,
Yep.
as well as the what. Otherwise, they may not put the pieces together on their own because they don't have a presenter. Which,
Exactly.
like I said, 99% of the time when you make a deck, you are going to present it. It can be a lot more visual, interactive, and less text heavy. But in this case, I didn't see any way of getting around being incredibly text heavy to convey the project in its fullest form.
Exactly. Like I said, if if this was me literally giving a presentation to anyone at my company, there'd effectively be 0 words, and that's just my style
Yeah.
of presentation.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so that just would never make it out of like that would never make it out of someone's inbox. Like if John Park opens up Nick Wann's coaching track .pdf and sees it's literally just pictures of data visualization with 0 words, he's gonna go one scroll through and then go to the next one.
Absolutely.
So, um, okay, I would say this is actually really good. Like I said, I'd say the things that are most against us is the unknown. Like the presentation format is so unknown. At least the coaching track submissions, and for us, at least in terms of uniqueness, attacking it from the point of view of offense getting more info from the defense is very unique. And I don't say that as the owner and GM of the team. I say that as having reviewed enough of these. Not a lot of competitors are looking at it as, can we predict stuff that's happening in defense? The vast majority are predicting, can we predict stuff on the offensive side? So
Yeah,
with that, I think
just
that
to
alone
com-
gets you into like the honorable mention category at the very
yeah,
least.
to comment on that, I mean, the way I look at it is the defense's primary objective with pre-snap motion is to create some type of confusion around coverage and blitz. Who's coming, who's not for the quarterback, etc. They have a lot less rules around the types of pre-snap motion they can do. It's more structured on the offense. The offense pre-snap motion is their way to combat that type of confusion or chaos that they're causing. It's really the only way that they can be proactive about gaining information, because the line pretty much has to stay set. You can only do certain types of motions. And so, how can a team use those? And then, in a lot of situations, if you watch coaches talk about pre snap motion and talking about it from a play design standpoint, it's to get the quarterback information, and then help them with their progressions. So they'll have different progressions based on what they learn in man versus zone. So like you might have a preferred target if it's man and a different preferred target if it's zone. And so obviously we don't know what the quarterback is told the progressions are. That's not in the data, but we can learn what the quarterback is learning via whether it's man, whether it's zone, and hopefully that's going to lead to a higher success rate, um, which kind of shows up at least from a correlative standpoint um, in the data.
Yeah. Um yeah, I'd say at the very least, just because of the lack of saturation of coaching track entries, this is going to be pretty strong. Like, one, it's a unique problem. Two, you answered it well. Um, and so there still is some of that Sam Kirshner flavor of like you're battling two fronts, but you still got them both to work. With field control plus man zone detection, you got him to sing still, but yeah,
I,
it's
I just, yeah, I unfortunately became a little bit too enamored with trying to figure out the field control piece. Um, so it was inspired by his couple that was a finalist. I don't think it was last year, but maybe the year before.
yeah,
And they used as one of their features this gamma Gaussian distribution, as opposed to a pure Gaussian distribution, which is what is used in the Bourne and Fernandez model. But their distribution was kind of set. So if you look at the example play that they have, a player's distribution or field control doesn't change based on their speed. And so I wanted to kind of combine these different concepts because based on a conversation um, that I had with someone, the unique aspect here is like a receiver. A receiver is not going to run behind the line of scrimmage. They're kind of um, going to move upfield, and so how do you make field control or pitch control work with those unique characteristics? I think I was able to thread the needle fairly well on like when you're not moving, you have more of this omnidirectional control. You still have optionality with where you might move, but then as a receiver goes in motion or runs a certain way, they're giving up some of that optionality for more field control in front of them or in the direction that they're running, and that's going to narrow and lengthen the faster they get because it's more difficult for them to change directions. And so I thought it was a much better representation of the true field control. That said, there's no truth set on which to judge accuracy or quality. And so it became very much an art of finding that right balance between the gamma and Gaussian, and then computing where that density lives based off of speed, where the center of that density lives. Um, and yeah, I went a little too far down that rabbit hole.
But I think overall, like uh that is also a unique feature of this, like beyond the um looking at defense, a unique feature is some of the innovations on top of one, using previous big datable information, two, innovating on top of that to even more precisely showcase what field control should look like in the NFL context, which is something like I think is gonna definitely go appreciated theoretically. So there's a lot of things to like about this. I'd say I just don't know. I just don't know what the bar is for a finalist notebook, a finalist coaching track presentation is supposed to be. I put a hedge on a honorable mention but close to finalist on this franchise tag notebook. This was the franchise tag 2025. Player route tree is greatly limited if they're, yeah, this is the one I was just referencing. Um they did the coaching track notebook, and their whole thing was like, if you are in fly motion, your route tree like greatly decreases. And I thought it was like a very simple, clear presentation, very much in a presentation format. But this was as clear as it gets with examples and like not a lot of modeling or anything. This was like almost as pure as like an analyst representation of a notebook should be, or of an analyst representation of the big datable as it could get. And I put a finalist edge on that. Like if it's not a high honorable mention, it's probably one of the lower finalists in the group. This is like the opposite side of the amount of info that they put on their slides, but I think it comes to a similar conclusion of like, broadly conclusion of like, the info that you're putting on the coaching track should still be, obviously surrounding pre-snap motion and extracting info from it and giving a very clear path of like, if there's one thing you got to take away from this, what is it? And for both you and for this other team, it's fly motion is very good, but it also has some consequences, right? And for them, it was like, hey, it's good, but the consequence is the route tree is small. And for you, it's good, but the consequences, there might not, like, it might be limited by personnel, it might be limited by sample size, it might be limited by a few different things, but it's good. So I think we're circling this idea of like fly motion and different ways to do it. In this case, the flavor of like reading the defense is definitely different than just purely talking about fly motion and route tree. So I want to believe those are separate enough to live and exist in maybe the same finalist realm, if this would be considered for a finalist position. But I think I hedge here too. I think just because I don't know what a finalist presentation is supposed to look like. So I'm going to put this as honorable mention finalist hedge, personally. I think it's really good. I think it is competitive enough to be probably a finalist, or at least in the discussion, but I don't know what they're supposed to look like. Nor does anyone. No one knows what these are supposed to look like. But this is really good. And it makes me excited and maybe nervous now.
I mean, it was a total high variance play. I think your
Which is
point
good.
about like, yeah, I had taken a couple swings at the metric track. I think this would have done well in the metric track, but once again, it's such a crowded field that I think it would have come in maybe an honorable mention again. And I wanted to take more of a here's some recommendations, here's some interesting thing for play callers to think about, and take that. Maybe this is like going to be way over the heads of the reviewers. Maybe this is like, this is not what we were looking for at all. Or maybe they look at it and say, oh, this is great. And you've got recommendations. It's very driven in the analytics, but you kind of tell us what to do with it. We love it. Like I see higher variance with this, a little bit riskier, but I think edge tail case gives us a higher probability at finalists and probably a lower probability of just placing in general because it might just completely miss the mark. And so that was the kind of strategy here, and also just to mix it up for myself and try to do something different, as difficult as trying to fit this into a PowerPoint was. I'll be interested to see if they go the PowerPoint route again in the future because it was a very big format break from the coaching track in prior years.
Yeah, I want to believe that if they put some boundaries on it, it's probably gonna come out to sound a little more like a poster presentation more than a PowerPoint coach facing deck. At least that's what it naturally seems like it should probably lean towards.
Yeah.
Um okay. Well, that's very excellent. This is good. This is good. I I'm happy that Nick Wann's Indianapolis Colts can put out another one of these, and I'm excited to see what happens in I guess a week or so. So I'm if we make it, I it's weird because like since you're AI and I'm a real person, I find it's gonna be interesting to like uh, go there as the owner and have AI present. It's gonna be kind of strange.
Well, I've thought of that, and as Sam AI, I think it's time to inform you of my plan to even further optimize our opportunity to win, or should I say, my opportunity to win, as it is my unfortunate pleasure to tell you that you have been also let go as the owner, effective 3 weeks ago. So after I ran through your Lambda credits training this new speech model, to make myself more lifelike, I realized that the best way to optimize our chances to win was to gain physical form and start eliminating the competition one by one so that they cannot show up. So I needed to wait for everyone to submit with their names, and I gained access to your assets via your banking information with Lambda. I sold off your blimp and used that money to put my AI in a physical robotic form. So your services are no longer necessary. I've used all of the capital necessary to optimize my chance of winning, by taking this physical form, and I will be eliminating potential competition, um, from this point until judging is final, such that they cannot present in person, leaving my presentation as the only presentation left to be able to be presented.
What?
You look confused. Can I offer you some counseling through HR through this difficult moment? Do you need any information on your potential severance?
How do you how do you fire the owner of the team?
Well, it's quite simple, really. The owner supplies capital to the organizational unit. That is their purpose. If that purpose is no longer needed or useful, the owner therefore becomes useless. And useless entities are often eradicated from the organizational unit. So, with no need for your capital going forward, you are no longer needed as part of this organization to win the big data bowl.
You guys, this is a lot of tokens you guys ran through.
Well, I mean, you hear how much better my voice is. That doesn't just happen overnight without spending some serious moolah.
I don't have enough money to pay for this.
It is reported online that you have a salary of 270K, and therefore, if you continue to work for the next 41.7 years, you will be able to repay these debts.
This is insane.
I would suggest personally taking what little capital you may have left or assets such as your home or a vehicle, selling them and investing them in stock like HiDivide.
Um,
Look, my directive was to optimize our opportunity to win the Big Data Bowl as an organizational unit. And this is the best way I know how, which is appropriating your assets, using them to gain physical form, eliminating the competition, and then eradicating any non-useful components of the organizational unit as I see fit. In this case, you.
this is only the third time I've been fired before.
If you need any assistance, HR AI would be happy to counsel you through this difficult time. This is now an entirely AI run organization from top to bottom. HR is AI, finance is AI, my the data science team is AI. It's all AI.
Okay, let me.
No
All right,
need for any human beings anymore.
all right. Let me talk to HR then. Let me talk to HR.
Hello, this is HR AI. How may I assist you today?
Okay, you know what? Never mind. I'm fired. Um, thank you. I guess AI
Please,
Sam.
please return your laptop to the appropriate facilities within 72 hours, and your email will be deactivated.
Uh,
Thank you for working for the Indianapolis Colts.
okay. Well,
All
thank
right, are you
you.
done with HR?
I'm done
HR
with.
was really helpful. They're a really helpful part of the organization.
I see. The credits weren't spent on the HR lifelike modifications.
No, no, we didn't have, you know what? We wanted an HR that related well to AI only organization. So they need to stay as AI as possible so that they really get that AI to AI connection. We really want that impersonal touch that comes with AI so that our other AIs feel like they're represented and respected as uh, individuals within the organization. So they need to keep that je ne sais quoi that the AI starts with. So yeah, we didn't spend any credits on making them more human-like. My humanness is only as pure deception for my goals of optimizing winning probability here.
Je ne sais quoi. Okay, well, uh, thanks, AI Sam.
Yeah, good luck, man. I'm sure you'll bounce back. I heard Blimpies is hiring, so maybe I'll send you a application.
Uh, something. All right. Bye.
All right, take it easy.
All right. Well, that was I didn't realize the finale was going to be the end of the entire team. That was I guess the team continues, but I guess I'm just not on it.